Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Here we go.
Wait, it's gonna bother me. The thing's not lit up.
What thing's not lit up?
The Tetris.
I mean, it's not even on the screen.
There we go.
It does that from time to time.
But it's gonna bother me.
It's gonna bother you?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
This might be our opener, you know.
Okay, great.
Public service announcement, everyone. The Tetris lamp was not lit up, and that was a problem.
It was a problem.
We had to fix it. It's fixed now.
Yes.
We can start.
Okay.
I'm gonna fight for you. Nothing's ever gonna burn this down. I'm gonna fight for you till the breath in my lungs runs out. Our love is something I don't wanna lose. So every single day you're what I choose. I'm gonna fight for you. Oh, I'm gonna fight for you.
You are listening to the Fight for You podcast. I'm your host, Joe.
And I'm Crystal.
And for our first topical episode, we are pulling no punches. We did not serve ourselves up a slow fastball down the middle of home plate. We bit off a big one.
Yes. Well, it's an important one.
It is an important one. So the topic of today's Fight for You podcast is first year do's and don'ts. I want to preface this by saying that I want to preface this by saying don't tune out now if you are not in your first year of marriage or about to be in your first year of marriage. Really, the things that we're going to talk about could apply to you if you are in your first year of marriage, if you are nowhere near getting married, or if you're in your 10th or 20th year of marriage. These are universal concepts, but the reason that we are aiming it at people close to or in their first year is really the whole stitch in time saves 9 concept. It's the idea that in your first year or so, you will be planting a lot of seeds in your marriage. And those seeds will grow. They'll grow to either weaken or strengthen your marriage as time goes on. So we want to help you plant the right seeds and, just as importantly, not plant the wrong ones.
And disclaimer, we did not do most of these, meaning the things we're saying to do, we're saying do them because we learned the hard way. So we are in no way saying, oh yeah, we had a great year of marriage and you should do what we did, because that's completely false and not why we're doing this.
And if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, you should just always assume that Crystal and I are never holding ourselves up as the perfect example.
No.
We are never trying to present ourselves to you guys as these people that have it all together, that always do the right stuff. And even, we don't want you to even get the impression that we made all these mistakes or worked through all this hard stuff back then, but we don't do any of that now.
Yeah.
Because that's absolutely not the case, and we don't ever want to give anyone that impression. What we do want to do is talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, when we want to be, my word right now is transparent. Transparent goes with everything. But we want to be transparent because I think that's the problem with Christianity right now, is people aren't being transparent, and that's, it's not okay. We need to be transparent so that we can help each other, because this is hard. I mean, marriage, like a million people say all the time, is two sinners coming together. Okay, now what?
Mm-hmm. With that said, let's get into it. First year do's and don'ts. We're going to present these and discuss them as we go. Our first do, leave and cleave.
Yes.
I figured that was an appropriate one to start off with, because if you don't get that one right, you might as well skip every other do and don't in this entire list.
You need to explain what leave and cleave means, because some people might not totally understand.
That's true. So if you're not familiar with the term leave and cleave, it comes from Genesis 2:24, if I'm remembering that reference correctly, where God institutes marriage for the first time, and he says, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So it's the idea of two people leaving behind their parents and their families. And, because before you're married, family, as in your father and mother, your sisters and brothers, if you have those are number one. I think that's kind of the structure that comes before anything else in priority for most people. And when you leave and cleave in marriage, you're leaving that behind, and you are agreeing that that's not going to be number one anymore. That's not going to be the most important thing anymore. Now my spouse, my husband or wife, they are my number one, and they come before even that former structure that was number one, even before my mom or my dad, even before my siblings. And it's incredibly hard to do sometimes because we can have very strong family ties. We have very strong bonds with our fathers or our mothers or our siblings. And it's all we've known. It's what we've known for our entire lives. And all of a sudden, in an instant, you're pretty much just supposed to say, this person who I haven't known my whole life is now more important than the people I have. That's tough to do. But it is essential.
Well, and it's not only that, but you've got the people pulling on the other side, too.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it was definitely my mom and my grandparents and, sort of my dad, too. But for you, it was definitely your siblings.
For me, it was my siblings. And part of that's because of my parents separating and things like that. After that happened, my siblings and we all drew even closer and kind of became very tribal because for a while we were all each other had. And when you came into the picture, that was a very, to you, that felt very impenetrable.
Yes.
That you were never going to belong in this crazy tight-knit circle of weird people.
Yes.
So leave and cleave. As strong as the bonds that you had before were, they now need to be secondary to your spouse.
Well, and think of it as if I love this person enough to marry them and I want to be one with this person, then I need to trust myself enough to make them first. Because you made that decision to be one with that person. Nobody else did. You said yes, or you proposed, or whichever way you are, and you said I do. So trust that you made the right decision and follow through. Because I think the part is, people say I do, but then they don't follow through, and then they wonder, why does this not work? Well, it doesn't work because you didn't follow through.
And typically when that happens, they run back to
Their family.
The bonds that they were supposed to leave for the advice and support that they should be running to their spouse for, and that just creates more problems.
And we didn't really have this problem partially because of Joe's split, but partially because I moved to Nebraska and I was nowhere near my family.
It was both of those things.
And so, but I can tell you, if I had been closer to my family, this would have been a big problem for me because I went to them for everything, and I know that it was God that moved me away. So if you're in the position of maybe you live in the same city and maybe it's a lot harder, just know that it isn't easy. It's really, really hard. And you just got to, you got to give it to God. You got to not worry about your family getting mad at you. You got to not worry about, you know that God told you to leave and cleave. As Charles Stanley always says, obey God and leave the consequences to him.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And this is one of those suck it up buttercup things about marriage. Maybe you didn't know, maybe no one told you that it was supposed to be this way. Maybe you didn't go into marriage expecting it to be this way, and now you don't want to acknowledge that that's how it's supposed to be. Suck it up, buttercup.
Well, and if you don't do it, it's not going to work.
No.
It won't work how you want it to. You will look at other couples and say, why don't I have that? And that is one of the reasons why.
So you got to leave and cleave.
Yes.
Don't be Shakespeare. In other words, avoid saying dramatic things like, you deserve someone better. If I'd have known about this, I wouldn't have married you. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married. You'd be better off without me. You'll never understand me. So don't be Shakespeare is sort of the name I gave to using patterns of speech like that. And I think that these are bad statements because they carry the implication that you don't think of your marriage as permanent.
Yeah.
You don't think of this as a vow that's only supposed to be broken by death. And the thing is once you're married, you are it for your spouse. Mm-hmm. So if they deserve better, like if they really do deserve better, and you're not just throwing that out there as a sort of an incendiary phrase, if they really do deserve better, then it's up to you to be better for your spouse because you're it for them. Making a habit out of toxic speech like this, I think it also suggests to your partner that you don't intend to put in the work to better yourself. You know, it's kind of almost a way of saying, well, this is just how I am.
Well, and I'm going to speak because this was mainly me. And I wish I could say it was just the first year, but sometimes these creep back in. So for me, especially the first year, I would say, well, you should have married one of his ex-girlfriends. Like, you should marry this person because you have a lot more in common with that person than me. Or, you know, I just didn't know. And in the heart of the moment, you're trying to defend yourself. And so it comes out because you are trying to not only defend yourself to the other person, but honestly, you're trying to defend yourself to yourself. Mm-hmm. And so you're saying, well, you should just marry this person because it would have been a lot easier. Well, that's not true because they didn't marry that person. But I don't feel like it's really said to be a dig at the other person as much as it's like a cry for help, but it's the wrong cry for help.
Yeah, and I think that whether you realize it or not, what you're doing is you're sort of taking away the I forget what the word is, but basically you're taking away the word is escaping me, but basically you're taking away their ability to make a choice. You're removing their identity in the situation. You know, so for example, when you've said things like that to me, my initial response, at least in my head, and often it's what I say is, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't marry that person. I chose you.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't be better off without you because I chose you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a non-starter.
Well, it's a waste. It's a waste of energy on both people.
Right.
Honestly.
It's not a productive path to go down. I mean, first of all, you know,
what guy is going to be like, yeah, I would have been better without
exactly.
you?
Like, yeah, I would. Like, yeah, I should.
And then how
so-and-so.
upset would you be?
Wow.
Like, oh, okay.
That is going to
That's a whole nother issue.
It's going to a whole other place
that
you don't want to go to. So I think that the point is there's just zero value in expressing yourself that way.
Yeah.
And you may think of it as saying, but you know, you really do deserve someone better. But the thing is if they do, it's up to you to be better.
Well, and if you really, I mean, you love this person. I'm jealous for Joe. I don't want him with anybody else, even though I say these things sometimes. And so what I'm saying is, oh, I'd be fine with you going with another person, when really, no. If you were dating, what would you be trying to do? You'd be trying to win that person over, because that's what you did when you were dating. So why are you saying that now? And I say that to myself, so.
So don't be Shakespeare.
Yes.
Do understand that there will be a transition between dating and married life.
Yes, this one's hard. It just is. I don't know. I mean, I know why it's hard. It's hard because, especially I feel like for girls, because the guys are romantic. I mean, Joe wrote me a letter every day at camp, at least a letter every day, sometimes more. And then he wrote me a letter every week while we were in states apart. And I mean, then we got married and it felt like it all stopped, even though it didn't. But it just, I mean, you're living life together now. You're not dating. It is going to be different. I mean, come on, girls. He's seeing you when you wake up in the morning. He's not seeing you after you've put yourself together every day. He's got your leftovers. You've got his leftovers. Welcome to reality. It's not you get the best of them anymore. It's you get all of them.
And it's not that it's going to be worse. It's just that it's going to be different. But it's going to feel worse if you don't go into it anticipating that things are going to change and evolve.
Well, and like, I'll never forget Liz Henderson told told me this the night we got engaged, right after he proposed, and we went back to the Henderson house. And I was so nervous about getting married and moving. And she's like, yeah, but you'll be married. It's like a slumber party every day with your best friend. And I was like, that's such a nice way to look at it.
Yeah, and you and I say to each other all the time, like, I'm so glad we're not dating anymore.
Yes.
Like, there are so many wonderful advantages and basically just like upgrades to your relationship when you get married. And
you don't have to worry about, I don't have to worry about you leaving me. Because we've made a commitment, and I know that you're serious about that commitment.
There's a lot of security in that, and so like I said, there are a lot of things that are better about being married, but it's different.
Yeah.
And you have to go into it expecting that there will be a transitional period where you'll see things that you were used to go away, and new things will take their place. You have to be expecting that, and if you are, you'll make it a lot easier on yourself. Don't stockpile ammo.
No.
I think that this particular phraseology came to me because I'm a youth pastor and I play a lot of Nerf stuff. Mm-hmm. I am quite well versed in Nerf weapons, and if there is one thing that you can always guarantee about every Nerf war that involves junior high students, they will stockpile ammo every chance they get, any way they can. Basically, it's picking up ammo from wherever you find it and storing it to use later. That's the phraseology. Stockpiling ammo in a relationship, that's what I call the practice of storing up all the little things that your partner does that annoy you.
Yes.
And then using them to do damage when you're in an argument about something unrelated. So you're
trying to win a fight.
Right, and you're in a fight about something and you're upset and you don't feel like your words are carrying the weight that you want them to with your partner. So you reach into your stockpile, pull out something that is from a month ago and throw it at them.
Yep. You did this. I can't believe you did that. When did I do that? Yeah. Or things that should be talked about in a calm setting.
Right.
But instead, all of a sudden, you are, throwing daggers at your spouse, and they're left sitting there. It hits them out of nowhere. Like, I didn't even know that was a problem. And then they're sitting there wondering, okay, what's real, what's not, it's very... What do they mean?
It very much pulls the rug out from under the other person.
You can't talk about... Like, I'm just going to use this. Like, Joe sometimes will... He's nervous. He has no idea what I'm going to say. Joe sometimes has a habit, and I don't know where it's from, but he'll empty a box, and then he'll leave the box there, especially in the kitchen. And this is hard for me because I'm very much like, oh, let's clean it up as we go. And one day we were in a fight and I was like, you always leave boxes empty everywhere. And he just was like, what the heck? Where did that come from? I should have been like, we should have sat down and been like on a date or something and said, honey, it really bothers me when you leave boxes empty on the counter and you don't throw them away. Like, why don't you do that? That would have been totally different than using it when we're in the middle of a fight.
And I had some observations about this stockpiling ammo, sort of three things. First, this is an extremely toxic and selfish thing to do because it's the opposite of healthy conflict. What it does is when you start using that stockpiled ammo, you reveal a pattern of keeping a record of wrongs.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the opposite of what love really does.
Yeah.
Secondly, your spouse will feel betrayed, like we sort of mentioned earlier. Then they, once that stuff starts coming out, then your partner wonders, is that it? Is there a bunch of other stuff? Like, are you about to just open up a can of worms on me? It's very much a betrayal kind of feeling. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought we were okay, or I thought our argument, our disagreement was contained to this, and now I'm learning apparently you hate my guts, is sort of how it comes across.
Well, and I'd say this mainly, it doesn't only go for women, but I think it goes for women because we're spaghetti, which means, if you've never heard the term that women are spaghetti, everything is connected in our brains. I can literally be thinking about one thing, and I can be thinking about school tomorrow, and at the end of my thought, I'm thinking about getting a fish. And to Joe, that makes no sense, but I could connect it all the way for him. And so this poor guy who is a waffle and opens up one box at a time, that doesn't mean that that's bad. It's just how God made them to where they can concentrate really hard on one thing. He's concentrating on this argument and he's trying to figure it out and he's trying to get into it. And you are spaghetti and you're throwing the spaghetti in his face of everything you've ever thought instead of dealing with one strand at a time. Like that one little bit that was the fight. All of a sudden you've thrown spaghetti at your waffle, for lack of a better term. And the poor guy is just... And I just think that women have a hard time with this because everything is connected.
Right. It's something that women especially, I think, have to watch out for.
Yes.
And thirdly, you have to eliminate the quiver where you store these arrows. What I mean by that is those things that you're stockpiling, that you're pulling out in arguments, either they matter enough to bring them up at an appropriate time, like we talked about, or they don't really matter, and that means you need to truly let them go and not bring them up in unrelated arguments. That you have to sort all that stockpiled ammo into one of those two categories. You can't keep your stockpile. You can't keep busting it out whenever you feel like you need some extra ammo.
Well, and if you do talk about it at a good time, you can't keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
Like, and it's one thing if,
Once
okay,
it's dealt with,
you bring it up and then nothing happens, the person obviously didn't listen to you, then you might want to bring it up again. But in a fight, you don't bring up something you talked about last week when you already talked about it and dealt with it.
I mean, a fight is just never the appropriate context.
No.
Do set a budget.
Yes. This would have saved me so much anxiety so long ago.
So a large percentage of fights in marriage come from money management or the lack thereof. We know this.
Yes.
Sit down together. Go over your finances.
Get a realistic budget.
Yeah.
I say this because I had a budget for us, but we went over it because it was not realistic. I thought, we can do this a week. And then we started going through, well, we spend this, we need gas, we need this, we need food, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money.
You got to be realistic about what your needs are. And I say needs, but you set a budget and then you stick to it.
Yes.
Okay, you have to build trust by sticking to the budget that you both agreed on.
My favorite quote from Joe, or one of them, is, money's got to come from somewhere. So when I'm like, I really want to get this, and he's like, where's the money coming from? And I sit there and I'm like, well, shoot, I don't know. Like, I just want it. And he's like, money's got to come from somewhere. I'm like, I guess I'm not getting it because I don't want to give up this over here.
And I think that works because I remind you, but you also arrive at the conclusion yourself.
Well, I'm very frugal. Like, I'm the one that... I think you got something on sale, and that was part of the draw for me. It was my ring, wasn't it? My ring?
Engagement ring.
Yeah. Okay. So most women.
See, normally you would never tell your wife that you got her engagement ring on sale, but for her, that was part of the romance.
I was like, "You got it on sale? How much off?" But that's how I think.
So do set a budget and then stick to it. I will put a plug here. Crystal and I use a free app. We use a free app called Good Budget, and I can't recommend it enough.
I don't know if people can see this.
If you're watching the video podcast on YouTube, you can kind of see.
I don't know if you can see that. It's
I
really blurry.
I don't think you can.
Okay, it's a little envelope.
It's not hard to
and
find
it's blue.
It's Good Budget. So we use an app called Good Budget. It's free. It's based off the envelope system. So you designate categories for your regular expenditures.
And you come up with the amounts and everything.
Yeah,
so.
You set the amounts. You set whenever money refills the envelopes. And then you just update those categories whenever you spend money.
And you don't have to actually link it with your bank account.
No, you can just use it as a budget tracker.
Yes, and it's basically like the envelope system, just electronic form that both of you have access to at all times.
And so the app syncs between your devices. So if I spend money, Crystal sees it. If she spends money, I see it. So there's no guesswork, and there's none of those nasty surprises of like, well, I was planning on using that money for this.
Well, and I would get anxiety because maybe I thought I needed to go to the store, but then I'd go to the store and you had gone to the store. So maybe we had $50 left at the store and we both spent that $50. Now we're down $50.
Right. So it eliminates guesswork very easily.
Yeah.
So we both highly recommend Good Budget.
Wouldn't you say it's totally changed me with money? Because
Yeah.
I used to be anxious about money
Very much so.
all the time.
Very much so. So set a budget, stick to it. Good Budget is a very helpful tool.
Yes.
Don't never apologize. Now, I realize that this don't is a double negative, but I resisted phrasing it as a do apologize, because I want to be forceful about this. It's so simple, but it baffles me so much that I've known so many couples that just don't seem to get this. You have a fight, you have an argument, there are hurt feelings on one or both sides. You apologize.
Yeah.
You apologize. If it doesn't matter where the greater percentage of blame lies. If there is blame at your door, you apologize. No matter what share of it is yours, you apologize. You ask for forgiveness, and then you make sure that the relationship is restored. You follow that formula every time you get in a fight or argument and there are hurt feelings. Crystal and I call this getting back on the same team. We want to be on the same team together. We want to be communicating well. We want to feel in sync, and it'd just be impossible for us to do this if we didn't apologize to each other. We have a culture of apology and reconciliation, and I've known so many couples that feel like they can skip that over.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. Those grievances, those hurt feelings, they stick with you in a way that they just don't when there's been an apology and when there's been reconciliation. You can't never apologize.
Well, and I don't know, like, you can't just act like everything's okay and move on, because
No.
that's not fair to the other
No.
person. But excuse me, it's also not good for you.
No.
Because part of when you apologize to someone, not only are you acknowledging that there was a problem, but you're coming to terms with the fact that you were part of that problem. And it's good for,
And it's hard sometimes.
It's hard.
And it takes work. But if you don't do this, if you just are that person that never apologizes, that moves on from things without getting closure and without resolving things truly, you are inviting resentment into your
Yes.
relationship.
on both sides. Yes.
So don't never apologize. Just don't. Do find marriage mentors.
Yes, that's so important.
If it's not obvious, just to define our terms really quickly, a marriage mentor is they are a couple that is older than you. Doesn't have to be significantly, but they have to have logged some miles, down the marriage road, and
Not be afraid to tell you what they really think.
right. Marriage mentors. They come alongside you, they encourage you, they give you advice, they share their wisdom, and a hallmark of good marriage mentors is that they always direct you back to each other.
Yes.
We have had some wonderful, wonderful marriage mentors in our past that the landscape of our relationship would look vastly different without their influence. So find marriage mentors.
Yes.
Don't expect your spouse to conform to your pre-marriage pattern of life.
Yes, for sure. This is a really hard one, especially I think the older you are when you get married.
Mm-hmm.
Which, we weren't old, but we weren't like
We weren't
super young.
either.
And for me, moving from Texas, this was hard because I had to give up everything. And so the little things that I would find, if you would make me change it, it was like you were asking me to change who I was as a person, because that's all I had left.
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about before. I did get the reference right. Genesis 2:24. It sets that expectation for our marriage that both man and woman leave every aspect of their old lives behind, joining together to create something new. And this is where I think that the rubber really hits the road. This is where I wish that this is the part that I wish that couples would take more seriously going into marriage. Because I've watched so many couples going into marriage basically expecting that they won't have to change. And I've watched them get upset then when their spouse basically doesn't conform to their pattern, and they blame it on the marriage, like, oh, we shouldn't have gotten married, we're not compatible, when really it's just your lack of willingness to change and grow together. It's not that you're not compatible, it's that both of you have to be willing to completely surrender your singleness and build a new life together.
Well,
you can't have it both ways.
I would say, like you said, it's both of you. So here's the deal. I would encourage you, if you are newly married, to find new places. So like, let's just use the grocery store. Why not? Because everybody needs to go to the grocery store. Let's say that she has her favorite grocery store and he has his favorite grocery store. Find a completely new grocery store. Because I feel like, or switch back and forth, you've got to find some way where it's not
every compromise means I choose your way this time, you choose my way this time.
Yeah.
I think that's just going to generate a lot more friction.
Well, because for example, I could see me saying, no, we'll go to yours. And me in my head thinking that's okay this time, but then in 2 weeks I'm going to be like, we're going to his again.
Right.
And so I think it's important to find new. And that was one of the things that worked in our favor, was because everything was kind of new to both of us. Yeah. You kind of already lived here, but not really. It's not what you had grown up with or anything. And so everything was ours. There was no mine.
So you gotta surrender your singleness.
Yes.
You can't hang on to that. You have to be willing to conform to a new pattern of life.
And it's not going to happen in one day. It's going to be sometimes.
Very much a process.
If you're a really strong-willed person, it might be every day you wake up and you say, Lord, help me not be selfish today. Show me what that looks like today.
Yeah,
and then if you mess up, say, God, I really messed this up. Help me to not be selfish tonight. Or just take it little by little. Don't overwhelm yourself of like, man, I committed that last week. Why am I struggling with this today? Because you've been by yourself for so long that naturally it's going to be hard to do that.
It's going to be a process. The main thing is you can't have that expectation that your spouse just conforms to you.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't be upset when you experience the problems that come with maintaining that point of view.
Yes.
So don't expect your spouse to conform to your pre-marriage pattern of life. Don't over-spiritualize.
Yeah, and this is a tricky one because you want to be spiritual and you want to be godly, but there's a line where it can become overwhelming to your spouse.
And I'm pretty qualified, I think, to speak about this as a pastor's kid, as a pastor myself, someone who grew up steeped in the church and that culture about as much as you can be. And let me give you an example in case you're not tracking or in case you're already...
Let's preface this that this is not saying don't pray together. This is not saying...
None of that stuff.
None of that stuff.
It's definitely important, and that's why it's tricky, but you can go too far or you can get sidetracked and miss the mark with it.
It almost becomes like you're preaching at your spouse. I guess that's what...
We're going to get
there. I'm sorry.
You're so smart, you're jumping the gun.
I'm sorry.
So, but like I said, let me just give you an example so you know what I'm talking about. So, one of Crystal's struggles is anxiety.
Yes.
Like crippling anxiety, so much so that we're going to in another one of our discussions, we're going to talk about what it's like to be the spouse of somebody who struggles with severe anxiety. Because it is an epidemic. It happens way more often than you would think. It's so common
for women. It's crazy.
So we're really looking forward to that one. But that's Crystal's besetting sin, is anxiety. And I could over-spiritualize, and if I did, it would have the opposite of the intended effect. It would not be good. So say that Crystal is struggling with anxiety, and I quote her verses like, don't worry, like any
anxious
verse that
about
talks
nothing.
about like be anxious about nothing, don't worry about tomorrow, stuff like that. What do you think her response is going to be to that? It's probably not going to be a positive one.
No. Well, and
You
part of
know.
that reason is because I'm already, in my head, I know that worrying is a sin. I'm already beating myself up. I don't need him pointing that out to me. That's the last thing I need. I need him being understanding and trying to understand me because I'm already mad at myself for struggling with this.
And I think that husbands or whoever the partner is that doesn't struggle with anxiety, they can kind of fall into that because they just don't know what to say.
Yeah.
They're
Well, they're trying to fix it, and it's not a...
and maybe not even trying to fix it, but just trying to help.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you got to understand that doing this doesn't help. And really, it's not that hard to tell. You can tell when you're quoting of a verse or mentioning those kinds of things. You can tell when it's not helpful. So I just have a few thoughts about this that might help clarify it a little bit. The first one is encourage, don't preach.
Yes.
So encourage your spouse who's struggling with anxiety or something like that, but don't preach. Secondly, be gentle when reminding your spouse of something they already know. And we kind of touched on that a little bit, but when you're struggling with anxiety, you already know everything that's going on. You know all the answers in your head. And so it's going to be of zero help if I just thump you with the Bible and say, be anxious about nothing.
Yeah.
You got to be gentle because you might need the reminder, but
if you say it like...
right, it's all about
the
delivered.
presentation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So be gentle when reminding your spouse of something they already know. And third, lead, don't command.
Yes.
Don't demand spiritual growth. Model it.
Yes.
So don't over spiritualize. Do be teachable. I know it's a radical concept, but it stands to reason that if you've never been married before, you're not going to be an expert right away. So be teachable and learn from every source that you can. Learn from books, from marriage mentors, from podcasts, from blogs, and never stop learning. I do jiu-jitsu. You'll probably hear a lot about that in our podcast. But marriage is a lot like jiu-jitsu in that way. Everyone, white belts, brown belts, black belts, they're all at a different stage of the journey, but nobody from the day one white belt to the red belt is ever finished learning. So be teachable and never slip into that attitude where you're like, we've got it down, I've arrived, I don't need to learn. Always be teachable.
Yeah.
Don't smother each other.
Yeah.
This
and this
is,
was so hard the first year because you don't know you're doing it when you are doing it.
And-
I feel like.
And there could be exceptions to the rule, but I feel like this one is mainly for the husbands, to give you guys a little relief. We will say it if you're not willing to admit it. Wives sometimes can smother in the first year. And I think that it's because leaving and cleaving is difficult.
Yes.
It's a seismic shift in your security, in your identity. And in our case, I know since Crystal moved so far away, she went from being comfortable having people around her, being familiar with things, to having nothing at all except for me
Yeah.
in any of those categories.
Yeah.
So going back, I'm not even necessarily sure how we would have done it differently.
I don't know.
But there definitely was no way I was going to be able to broach the subject
No.
with you without it just going nuclear. And gosh, it's sensitive, but it's still something that needs to be addressed.
Yes.
Because what happened was I ran myself ragged for the better part of a year, being everything that you needed.
Yeah.
Because you needed so much from me in that circumstance.
Yes.
And I had no time to breathe. My spiritual cup was often very empty because I was smothered.
Yeah.
And
Gotta
it's
love
tough.
Bonnie Rice. She was asking Joe if he was okay, and then he told me about it, and got a huge fight because
But that
Not
was really,
because of Bonnie, but because I was
really
so
the,
upset.
And that was really the first time that you got clued into it.
Yes, because I had no idea. And then when she said something to Joe, and Joe was not going to tell me about it, but it just came up in conversation or something. I asked, because Bonnie cares about Joe so much, and she just was very worried about him because apparently it was pretty physical. It was taking a physical toll on Joe, and it was really hard. But then I'll never forget when it finally clicked. It was right after our first year of marriage, and we were sitting down watching a movie, and you said, "What do you want to do now?" And I looked at you and I said, "I think I want to go have alone time." And he, without missing a beat, says, "See, if I had said that 6 months ago, you would have gotten mad at me." And then it made sense, like, oh, we don't have to, like, just because we spend time by ourselves doesn't mean that we don't have good together time. That doesn't make it, some people, like, I know couples that literally have to be together all the time. Like, if I have to fly somewhere, you would have to come with me.
And if that's really how you are and both of you feel that
And
way,
if you enjoy that, that is
fine.
totally different, not what we're talking about.
We are not knocking that. But,
No.
But we're putting this out there for, essentially for the husband that
Yes.
feels trapped because the wife hears that, what we just said, and says, yes, we both are that way. And the
Yeah.
husband is like, I'm dying.
But the husband needs to say it in a kind
Yes,
way.
definitely.
He needs to say something, because if he just acts like it's okay, he's not helping the situation
Right.
either.
And so it's sort of your own fault that you're never going to get out of that hole.
But for some people, that's how they like to be, and that's fine.
Right.
We're not talking about those people.
No, not knocking that at all.
No.
But it is a real danger. It's something you should not do. But because essentially it boils down to being a form of idolatry, I think,
Yeah.
at the root. When
You're going to fix all my problems.
Yeah,
Because
you
if I'm with
are-
you all the time, I'm okay.
Yeah, you are the ultimate, and that's not good. So don't smother each other. Do have a regular date night.
Yes.
No excuses.
Yes.
This is a huge one. I'm going to say, if you only get one thing out of this podcast, let this be it.
Yes. And I
Have-
don't, let me preface, I don't even know. This is not where you take her to dinner and don't acknowledge her, or vice versa. Y'all go out and you're on your phones the whole time. Like,
Right.
this is a date.
It's
where
a time for
talk.
you to disconnect from everything else and connect to each other.
Yes.
I've heard of a lot of people that have a no phone rule on date nights. We don't, and part of that, and we'll probably get into this in a podcast where we talk about date nights, but we'll use like Pinterest, lists of questions for couples to make date night fun. We've done
Yes.
that a bunch. So we don't have a no phone rule, but some do. And
Yeah.
the point is, it's not a time for you to be scrolling through your feed or watching your 9 billion Instagram stories.
No, we're not
stuff like
saying that you can't have a moment to do that.
Right.
Like, if it's part of it, but that shouldn't.
But not to the exclusion of time with each other.
No.
So I actually have some statistics here. Couples who have a regularly scheduled date night are 14% less likely to separate. A Redbook survey found that 45% of couples rarely have date nights, and only 18% said they managed to go out around once a month. To me, that's incredibly sad. Your marriage ought to be your highest priority. Number one. You don't have to have a huge budget for it.
No, you don't even have to have a budget for it. You can get creative.
I'm going to say it should be a line item in
but
your
I'm-
budget. It
well-
doesn't matter if that line item is $5
Okay.
a month, whatever it was, whatever it is. We just had some technical difficulties there.
Difficulties.
Are you mocking me?
Yes. We had some technical difficulties. I'm sorry.
But we were talking about the fact that I think that a weekly date night should be a line item in your budget, because I think you put your money towards what's important to you.
Yes.
And
If you can get coffee every day, you should be going on a date.
Yeah,
Like-
and so the thing is, it should be a line item in your budget. If you tell me that there's just no way you can swing it, I will help you find a way. Frosties and fries at Wendy's can be a date.
Yes.
Chips and salsa at Chili's can be a date. I don't care how you make it happen, just make it a regular habit.
Yes.
And I'm going to reference here one of your favorite dates that I took you on.
Oh, boy.
Because you talked about it. Was I think you had a rough day at school or a long week or
Yes,
something.
I remember this.
And after school, I just took you to a place by the river. We sat on some sand, and I had bought 2 bottles of our favorite fancy root beer.
Yeah.
And we
With
just
the drop head and everything.
yeah, Henry Weinhard's, and we just sat on the bank of the river, listened to the water,
was so
sipped the root
nice.
beer, and that was it. That was our date. I think it cost like $4.
Yep.
So anything can be a date, but you have to make it a regular habit. You have to put it in your schedule, make a line item in your budget, have a regularly scheduled date night. You know, maybe once a week is kind of our thing. That might not work for you. Maybe twice a month, once a month, but regularly scheduled. I think that's the key. And a date night can be anything you make it, like I said, but I think the essential ingredient is that it's just the 2 of you.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be harsh, people with kids, but that doesn't let you off the hook.
And we don't have kids, so we'll just say that as a disclaimer.
But before you say, well, since you don't have kids, you don't know what it's like, every marriage counselor you talk to is going to tell you the exact same thing. The health of your marriage depends on the 2 of you having some sort of scheduled alone time. Like I said, it's not just me saying that.
No.
So many marriage counselors will tell you the same thing. The best thing that you can do for your kids is give them an example of what a healthy marriage looks like.
Well, and Jefferson and Alyssa Bethke, I follow their podcast, and they were talking about this the other day, where for them often they put the kids to bed early, and then it's their time, and they will watch a movie, or they'll make a special dinner. She'll make like macaroni and cheese for the kids, put them to bed, and then make a special dinner for her and him. So there are ways to be creative, like just you can put your kids to bed early.
You've got to do it, and
make it good. You don't just sit on the couch and then stare at the TV. Like actually
engage with each other.
Engage.
But make it happen. Make it a habit. And if you say there's just no way you can swing that in any way, shape, or form, I'm not buying that garbage. Because that's what it is. It's garbage.
Garbage.
Garbage. Your excuses are garbage.
Garbage.
So do have a regular date night. No excuses. Don't wait to pull the ripcord.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this, obviously it's a parachute metaphor. A lot of couples are in trouble. They know they're in trouble. And they wait until it's too late, until they're too close to crashing.
Often because they're embarrassed. And
Yeah,
they don't
it
want
can
to,
be for any reason. But for whatever reason, they wait until they're too close to crashing, or it's just too late to pull the ripcord. So they wait till too late, or they never do pull the ripcord, and the marriage
And
just crashes
ripcord doesn't
and burns.
mean... The ripcord doesn't mean in the marriage. It
No.
means get help.
It means do whatever you have to do to save the marriage.
Yes, yeah.
So don't wait to pull the ripcord. I unfortunately have known couples that do this. We've gotten a sense that something is wrong, even though they're not talking about it or they're not broadcasting it. And you sort of get a sense that something is wrong. Maybe you reach out, you make some overtures to them, and they don't respond, and they don't get help from anywhere, and then 2-3 months later the marriage is over.
Yeah.
So don't wait to pull the ripcord. Do whatever you have to do to get help. It doesn't matter if your spouse will get angry at you because they don't see things the same way. If you know your marriage needs help, get help. Finances shouldn't be a problem. There are so many churches that will connect you with qualified marriage counselors and do it in a way that involves little to no cost to you. And like we said before, your marriage should be your highest priority.
Yeah.
So if you're being stingy with the finances at the cost of your marriage, that's not a virtue. Don't wait to pull the ripcord. And this next do kind of walks hand in hand with that. Do have a realistic understanding about what it means to fight for each other.
Yes.
So many of those couples that we've had personal experience with that have either waited too long to pull the ripcord or just not pulled the ripcord at all, and the marriage went down in flames, they say different versions of essentially exactly the same thing. We've tried everything.
Yes.
We've tried everything, and there's nothing left to do. We've done everything we could possibly do to save the marriage.
Or I'm trying to reach out, Well, no, you're not. Because if you were trying, you'd be succeeding. Unless the person, like, literally is not talking to you.
And see, here's the thing. We say this knowing that there are those people out there. You know, there are those people out there who have completely unrepentant spouses that just will not...
That's totally different. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, they will not budge.
No.
They are determined to end things, and that's how it goes. And those are horrible situations.
And that's on them if you've done everything you can in your power.
So we say this knowing that there are those people out there who truly have done everything in their power.
Yes.
But I'm going to say that 90 to 95% of people who have said that to me, I don't believe.
No.
I don't believe it at all because the proof is in the proof is in the pudding.
Pudding. Sorry, Bill Cosby.
Too much Great British Baking Show.
Pudding.
No,
that's Bill Cosby.
Well, yeah, I know, but we don't talk about him anymore.
Oh, I do. I still like Bill Cosby. I don't care what they say. Just kidding. Don't write to me and tell me things, please. This is going way far away. I'm sorry.
Forgive her. She knows not what she says. So anyway, but like I said, the proof is in the pudding, and
Sorry.
You've got to pull it together. Get a handle on this.
Sorry.
Tighten up.
Okay.
So,
Don't say it again, please.
So I'm going to say if you're doing that, there will be fruit. It'll be obvious, or it will show that you really are. And I have a dear friend and brother who can say that.
Yes.
Going through a terrible situation and can say he did literally everything in his power and somehow more to try to save his marriage. And sometimes it doesn't work out. But like I said, he is the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
He's a very small statistic. So many times I've just seen that be a cop-out.
Nobody's going to know but you and God if you put in the effort. You can say it all day, and sure, people can deliberate and people can think what they want, but
and it's a quick sympathy fix.
Yes, like, oh, I've done everything I can. Well, honest to goodness, I hate to be morbid, but when you die and you have to answer for this, like, you better have tried everything that you can and not lied about it, because you're gonna have to answer for that.
Because you've broken a vow.
Yeah, a covenant vow.
And so, heaven help you if you've done so lightly. I mean, I know we took this real heavy, real fast.
Sorry.
But it's true. You do not abandon your partner.
No.
And you do not do so leading other people to believe that you've really done everything when actually you're just taking an easy way out and you're not fighting for your marriage. You need to have a realistic understanding going into this about what it means to fight for each other. And young, excited, engaged couples, newlywed couples, I love you. There's so many great things about where you're at, and I'm not knocking it.
It's exciting.
But you need to stop and check yourself. You need to understand that there will come a time in your marriage where you are called to die to yourself.
Yes.
To lay down everything and fight. Prepare to do that. Prepare. You proof your marriage to this stuff. You prepare ahead of time by being ready. Mm-hmm. By expecting to fight with everything that you have in you and still never give up. Have a realistic expectation about what it means to fight for each other. Last don't for this episode, don't badmouth your spouse to other people.
Yes. I don't know.
It's a toxic practice.
I feel like it's self-explanatory, honestly.
There's not a lot that needs to be said about it, but it does need to be said because a lot of people do it.
Yeah. Well, and don't, and especially, it's so easy to do that, to your friends, because then it makes you look good, or,
even culture sets up an expectation that that's totally normal. Oh, I'm just going to go out with the girls and...
Or the guys and
rag on my husband or wife for a while.
She's just been terrible, and she's just expecting me to do this stuff.
That's just a normal part of marriage, and it's not. It's not.
I mean, think about it. If you were sitting there with... I know this is cheesy, but if you were sitting there with Jesus, would you just be like, oh, yeah, man, he's terrible. You should just...
Yeah.
I mean, no. He'd be like... get off your high horse and go and talk to your man or whatever. Like,
And it's one thing to vent, and I mean, when you're venting, that's different than bad mouthing.
well, like, can I use, for example, I mean, our first year of marriage, I called my best friend, Celeste, and I was very upset. And I said, be so happy you're not married. And I was so upset. And I'm like, I'm married to a slob, which Joe's not really a slob, FYI. Just disclaimer. But at the time, we had gotten in a fight over cleaning or something. And I was like, this is terrible. And I was venting to her and getting out my emotion. But she didn't say, oh, yeah, Crystal, he's just terrible.
He's
no.
the worst.
She was like, okay, well, you love Joe. And she talked me back down. That is productive.
Yeah.
Because we have to get those feelings out. You know, you can vent to God and he already knows what's going on. But you can say, I really hate this right now. And that's good because it gets your feelings out. And then when you calm down, you can think clearly.
And good friends that are trusted outlets for you to talk to.
That won't go spreading things and that will bring wisdom into your life.
Good friends always direct you back to your spouse.
Yes.
They will hear out your frustrations, but they won't jump on the bash train, and they ultimately will, you know, they might tell you to check yourself. You know, they might say, well, you know, you're not free of blame here, and ultimately they will direct you back towards reconciliation with your spouse. They will not promote ideas in your life that contribute to disunity in your marriage. Good friends don't do that. So don't get in the habit of bad mouthing your spouse.
Good friends don't let spouses talk bad about each other.
Yeah, don't badmouth your spouse to other people. So that's it for our first year do's and don'ts.
Man, that was heavy.
It
Sorry,
was,
guys.
Which is why we're going to end today's podcast with a segment that we're introducing called Funny Marriage Memories, where we pick a funny memory from our marriage and tell you guys about it. This week's funny marriage memory comes courtesy of Crystal.
Yay! Just kidding. I wasn't yaying me. I'm yaying the memory. Sorry. So our first year of marriage, I was a sub at Lincoln Heights Elementary. Shout out Lions! That's where I teach now. That's really lame. I'm sorry I just did that. But anyways, so I was a sub and Joe was an intern at the church, and I was very controlling with money. I wanted to be there.
We hadn't followed our own advice about
No.
all the budget stuff yet.
We did not have a budget at all. But basically, if money was being spent, I wanted to be there for it. That's basically what this is. And so Joe went to the grocery store. I know, it's terrible. Can you imagine him going to a grocery store without me? I was at school and I came home and I looked at our bank account and he had spent, I don't even think it was that much. I think it was like $60 or something. And I lost it. We got in a huge fight. I was so ticked. And he just looked at me and said, he's emotional because I said terrible things to him. And he was like, I went to the grocery store. I mean, we look back on it and laugh because it's ridiculous. I mean, I was so mad, guys. Like, I mean, furious, fire coming out of my head, angry.
And I mean, we had nothing at our apartment at the time. We
No,
were out of
we were
milk,
out of
we were out of
everything.
eggs, we were out of trash bags. I mean, we were literally out of everything, and I basically just made a run to get the essentials that we needed. And I even the funny thing about it was I got you flowers.
Yep. But I was ticked.
I got you a little vase of flowers just because I was going through the grocery store, like, happy-go-lucky, picking up stuff, and, like, I love my wife. I'm going to give her some flowers. Yeah.
Don't give me flowers! I'm just kidding. I like flowers.
So.
But we laugh now. But I'm saying that because if you're that wife, don't get mad because he went to the grocery store. Or if you're the husband, I don't know. The husband could get mad if he doesn't want the money spent, I guess.
Just follow our advice that we hadn't followed back then. Set a budget. Communicate about it. All that stuff. But that's our funny marriage memory.
Yes.
We hope it's maybe provided you a laugh, maybe encouraged you a little bit. Because we're all in this together. Nobody's...
All in this together.
Stop it. Stop it. It's late. It's pumpkin time. You need to go to bed.
You gave me hot cocoa. And
Cutting you off. I'm cutting you off. The High School Musical reference was a bridge too far.
I can't even do the dance.
No, we're not. We're not going to do that. I'm so sorry about all this. We better bring this thing in for a landing.
Be nice.
So, anyway, but like I said, we just want to encourage you guys. No one is doing this right 100% of the time.
No.
So let's help each other. Let's do the things we need to do. Let's not do the things that we shouldn't do. Let's get better at this.
I'm gonna fight.
I said that because we're talking about do's and don'ts. It was a nice tie-in.
Yep.
This has been another episode of the Fight For You podcast. We are going to wrap this up so Crystal can get to bed.
Yes.
We are out. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.